What are some of the most eerie and unexplained mysteries that you have experienced in your life? Still to this day I have no idea what went down here. About a year ago now I was sitting at home watching a movie and noticed out onto the backyard patio a man standing there looking straight up in the air. As high as his head would go, almost looking backward. Scared the living shit out of me. Person was as still as a board. He was dressed in very nice clothes though, a royal blue suit with brown shoes, which didn't really fit the scene. I grabbed my cell phone and watched him for a minute to see what he was doing before I'd call the police. Out of nowhere he shook his head, almost out of a trance, and looked around to see where he was. He took his cell phone out and started making a call. At that point I opened the sliding door, with the screen still being shut, and asked if he was okay. He sounded very frantic and said he doesn't know how he got there. I told him where he was and apparently he lived a few streets over. He walked out the side gate after apologizing profusely. I've seen him a few times in passing and he seemed extremely normal, drives a Porsche Cayenne. No idea WTF that was about. When I was 15 I lived in a 2-story house. My dog used to sleep with me. One night he was growling so loudly it woke me up. I had my back to my window and opened my eyes to a bright green light against my entire wall, obviously coming from the window. I wanted to turn and look but I swear my body wouldn't let me turn around. I stood up back to the window, called my dog, picked him up and walked in the hallway. I closed the door and looked at the bottom of the door to see the light blasting from underneath it. I didn't tell my parents. I just slept in the hallway holding my dog that whole night. TLDR. Bright green light forced me out my room when I was a teenager. Okay, let me preface this by saying I categorically do not believe in the supernatural of any kind. I'm not religious and consider myself agnostic leaning atheist. I have no clue why this is happening. I've owned the same house for over 23 years. It began almost immediately. My spoons have been disappearing at an alarming rate. At first, I put it off to the kids. But it didn't stop even after they had moved out. I lived alone for many years and they would still vanish. I checked garbage. I've searched corners and every place where they could conceivably be and not be. I once bought 120 metal teaspoons and they were all gone within a year and a half. More than 10 per month. Oddly, the plastic spoons still disappear, but much more slowly. I will count and keep track of them, and that slows it down. But they somehow keep vanishing. My granddaughters now live with me, but it doesn't seem to be a factor. It's worse in the fall for some reason. I estimate I've lost more than 1,000 spoons somewhere in this house and I can't find them. No, I'm not senile or crazy. Others have noticed the spoon thing here. I can't explain it and have stopped trying. I don't care if anyone believes this shit or not, but you asked and I was in the mood to type it out. I just counted. I'm down to 7 spoons. 3 teaspoons and 4 tablespoons. 3 teaspoons missing since I last checked sometime last month. I'm not the kind of person to have a great many friends, but those friends I do keep are sacred to me. So one evening I was getting out of a Rotterdam subway, block, to go to my apartment near there, when I see an old friend, one I haven't seen in the flesh in a few years, heading into the subway. I call out his name, he turns, waves and makes this call me gesture, then the doors close and the subway rides off. 30 seconds later, my phone rings. It was my friend, who told me he'd just seen me get in the normal train he'd used to get home from the bar apparently. I had grinned, waved, gestured call me, the door shut and the train drove off. I lived in Rotterdam. He lived in Enschede. That's just over 200 kilometers apart. Or about 125 miles. I remember one thing that genuinely freaked me out when I was 12. I had awoken and gone to the kitchen to fix myself some breakfast. When I got there, I heard my dad snoring coming from the couch in the living room. I thought it was strange for him to be sleeping since it was 10h and he typically woke up early. But maybe he is taking a nap. As I'm walking towards there, the snoring keeps on getting louder and louder to the point it sounds exaggerated. Just as I pop my head over the couch to say hi, the sound just stops. Nobody is on the couch. I call out to my family and nobody answers. They had gone out to get lunch. I still can't explain it to this day. I usually have these weird premonitions about completely useless and unimportant things, like the other day I went to get some cereal and before I opened the cabinet I put my hand out because I felt like the box was gonna fall out. Opened the cabinet, box fell into my hand. The weirdest one was when I was down in the living room while my phone was upstairs. I was just casually watching TV when I felt the need to go up and check my phone. Like it was an absolute necessity to get up and go check my phone. I get up and go to my room, and the second I open my door, my phone goes off because my friend called me to tell me he took the biggest shit of his life. I have an aunt who had lifelong heart problems, and one night her heart decided to stop and she ended up passing away. My family was throwing a party and she had left for the night. She decided to come back and take pictures of all of the family members for her phone book. Keep in mind this was when camera phones were a new thing, so she wanted a picture for every number in her book. As she was taking one of the photos is when her heart stopped. Her husband, my uncle, a few days after decided to look at her phone and found the last picture she took right when she passed. It was what appeared to be a flash. The flash was shaped like a white dove flying away. She wasn't facing a mirror or anything reflective for said flash to bounce off of. My family thinks that she somehow was able to take a picture of the light right before she passed. I saw the picture over 12 years ago and I still vividly remember it. It was definitely eerie. TLDR, my aunt may have taken picture of the light people have claimed to have seen before passing on. I used to work in a crisis shelter when I was in my early 20s. We had a small walk-in room with a solid lock on it to store anything that could be misused by the residents, such as medications, cleaning chemicals, kitchen knives, etc. One night the residents had settled in to watch television while I completed some paperwork, and the door to the medication storage room swung open by itself. I thought perhaps it had not caught properly last time I closed it, so I just pulled it shut and thought nothing more of it for the next few minutes. Then it swung open again. I pulled the door shut and this time jiggled the handle several times to make sure it had caught, and got one of the residents to also test it. It was definitely locked solid. A few minutes later, it swung open again. Wanted to nope out of there but was stuck on a 12-hour sleepover shift. After that it never happened again, but the residents spun a huge story about the ghost of someone who OD'd in the medication room, which became part of the shelter folklore. A family member's house was always known to be haunted when I was a kind. Not in a scary or violent way, just in a kinda creepy something feels weird way. We had a family gathering there when I was 3 or 4 years old and I was in the kitchen with my mom and the owner of the house. A fluffy cat walked in and I pointed at it and said, "AWW kitty." I remember my mom had a weird look on her face and asked me, "What kitty?" and I pointed at it again. The owner of the house laughed and said, "Looks like a lawful sponge, can't see Robbie." I don't remember much else except my mom being really quiet for the rest of the gathering, and clinging on to me until we left. Years later, when the owner passed away, I mentioned the cat to my mom, as well as a few other weird things that happened there, and she said she was freaked out because the cat wasn't really there. The owner told her it was an old spirit that protected the house and only myself and the owner could see it. And the owner had asked my mom to keep an eye on me and let her know if my sight ever progressed into adulthood. I don't think it did. The owner of the house was notorious for claiming to be a psychic and a medium, but I never thought much of it until I heard that. I legit remember seeing that cat and continuing to think of it randomly throughout my life. My father's 2 sisters each lost her husband within a year of each other. Their husbands had been friends, so they ended up buying cemetery plots next to each other. So at the second funeral, we're lowering Uncle B into his grave. Suddenly, I hear a sizzle. I look up, and instead of a graveyard I'm in a backyard, and Uncle B is grilling. Uncle A, who's been dead a year, says to me, "Do you want some lamb?" Before I can answer, I blink again and I'm back in the graveyard. I tell people that's my seeing a ghost story, but I've considered that it was maybe a vision of the other side. Having my mother say she was scared of me but not understanding why for the longest time. Then one morning I figured out why and I was terrified as well. But I still can't explain WTF happened, nor can I verify if she was able to see what I saw. I was living with her and my older brother in a 2-bedroom apartment while trying to get through school. They each had a room and I slept out in the dining room and shared the master walk-in closet with my mother. I wasn't fond of the living situation and so made a point to just never be home except to sleep and shower. I didn't interact with her much at all, and when I did, only to ask if she wanted some dinner or if she needed anything from the store. So not being home much, I couldn't for the life of me understand why my mother was so terrified of me. That was until one morning I was in the closet changing clothes to get ready for the day. It was stupid o'clock in the morning. I walked out of the closet and saw a figure standing next to her bed leaning over her. My mother was still asleep. I stood there staring at it, too shocked to move because it looked like me. It had my hair, my face, my body. Chills ran through me. After a bit the shock wore off and I noped it the duck out of there. My mother is doing much better and I live on my own now. No incidents since then and she's no longer scared of me. Still can't explain what I was seeing that morning. I was in the car with a small child 4 years old. We were on a road never taken in the past, on vacation. It was the little girl of my friend also in the car for context. She obviously didn't know how to read nor any street signalization. Out of the blue, she said, "I feel a lot of suffering and death around here." No prompt to her declaration. A couple of seconds later we were passing in front of an hospital. She made a couple of eerily accurate predictions like that. Not too obvious either, but still. And then she grew older and she stopped. Moved into an older home in NJ when I was much younger with my family. I was maybe 11 or so at the time. We were getting our stuff moved in and situated one day, furniture and such, when I noticed something very strange. Where my parents had set a trash bin behind the door that leads into the garage, I discovered an outline of a similarly sized child against the wall behind the trash bin they had placed. The outline was shaped as though someone had just traced their kid in a resting position against the wall, but menacing facial features were drawn into it. Demonic looking eyes, with a very narrow smile bearing sharp teeth. Under these features read Nikki, and that was all inside the outline. They must not have noticed it because it only stood a few feet tall in light pencil. It disturbed me and my younger siblings greatly, and when I showed my parents they laughed and were 100% convinced we were pranking them with this ducked up looking illustration in our new house. Unfortunately we weren't. Fast forward 2 years later. My father is doing work upstairs in an attic cubby, moving bins around to make room for more stuff. While doing this he bumps a wooden 2x4 in the structure of the attic and noticed that it was very loose. He tugs on it and is surprised to see it pulls out easily. Behind the 2x4 was a drawing. A familiar small outline of a child with demonic eyes and sharp teeth. This time it bears a crudely drawn dress. Next to it read Nikki. Once we were fishing off the west coast of BC, Canada. We stopped to jig for halibut. The depth sounder said something like 100 foot deep. It was an old school depth sounder, so you can't see a picture, just a red light at the 100 foot mark. So we let our jigs down and they stopped at about 40 feet down. We had our rods out opposite sides of the boat, so our jigs would have been 20 feet apart at least. We both jigged a bit and trying to feel the bottom when our jig hit it. Usually you can tell if the bottom is sand or rock. This felt softer than a rock but harder than sand. After a few jigs we couldn't feel it anymore. So we let our jigs go down some more and they both went the other 60 feet down to the bottom. At that point, we noped out of there. What the hell was that under our boat? Philippines. My apartment has a view of the city and I was getting ready to go to work. I look out and see this glowing red orb high above the city. I try to think logically, is it a helicopter? A crane light? That light on top of buildings? A spotlight? No, looked like it was a floating ball of light, bobbing around 100 feet above the building, and it was large enough that it looked that it was prominent to whoever was looking at it. I called my so to look at it and she was confused what it was. It just floated, hovered idly. It didn't look like it had any physical indicators, propellers, Wings, metal. We stared at it for a few more minutes and then suddenly, this orb moves faster than any helicopter plane north. No, it did not zip upwards. It didn't move like lightning. It moved faster than anything I've seen that's flying. You know how a plane helicopter in the sky seems slow in the distance? This one was moving way too fast for that. It even changed direction seamlessly, not in an arc but a sharp turn. Me and my so freaked. I was never a believer of UFOs, but damn did I believe it then. We tried to search social media and the news about it. There were some posts about it, but it never really went viral enough to be picked up by the local news. Edit. So I was trying to think of ways to describe its movements, and the best way I can describe it is how Yamcha from Dragon Ball controls his energy orbs. Not a lightning ball. Compared what I saw to Yaotu, no similarity other than it was a ball. I'm late to the party, but this story is both freaky and super inexplicable. When I was a kid, like 12-13, I was playing with my friends in their backyard. It was a perfect summer day outside, probably around 80 degrees and not a cloud in the sky. This detail is really important. So we're playing and I'm chasing my friend, but I suddenly stop because I notice something strange. I exhale and I realize that I can see my breath, just as you would on a really cold day. I call my friends over and they thought I was smoking or something because of how thick the vapor was. None of them can see their own breath until they are standing right next to me. It was only happening in that one specific spot. We walked around, but that was only in that one area that it was visible. All of us ended up just going home because we got pretty freaked out. I've got a couple. When I was about 10-12, a neighborhood buddy and I were camping in the woods. In reality, we were a couple acres behind his house in some forest that backed up to a state park, but that was about as close to camping as I was comfortable with. We had one of his family dogs with us, a beautiful and very protective mutt named Abby. She wasn't the type to startle easy. In the middle of the night we started hearing movement in the forest and Abby started growling and sniffing the air. Probably a deer, we assumed, until we unzipped one of the windows of the tent a bit to look outside and clearly saw a human figure in the moonlight. It seemed to be standing by a tree just watching us. We kinda spooked ourselves and decided to quietly get our shoes on and bolt back to his place and abandon the camp for the night. As soon as we opened the tent, Abby bolted out the figure, who ran off into the night. She eventually made it back by morning. The other one is much shorter, and a bit more strange. I grew up in the south and a lot of late summer early fall nights it will cool off and get really super foggy. My maternal grandfather turned his old family farm into a subdivision where I grew up, so he knew the area well. We were always warned about deer when we started driving, because they were all over the damn place. I was around 17-18 and driving home one night in the fog, fast and invincible as teenagers are. My grandpa had died a couple years earlier, and I swear I heard him say turn your brights on, more in my head than anything else. I was startled but did as I was told, and there was a group of deer crossing the road that I never would have seen otherwise. I didn't say anything about it to anyone. The next morning, outside my bedroom door, my mom had put a pack of those deer whistlers that you put on your front bumper to scare deer off. My mom had a dream where my grandpa told her to buy me some. That one still comes up in conversation 15 years later. My family jokingly calls me a witch because weird things always happen around me. Like another redditor in this thread, I sometimes get weird or useless premonitions, like I know the phone is going to ring, or I know something will fall, or something is going to happen. That being said, I've had a series of coincidences that have made people uncomfortable. Like knowing that the fire truck I randomly saw as a child was on its way to my house. No, I didn't start the fire. Or sending an online voodoo curse to someone and then they got into a horrible skiing accident that same weekend. Or getting mad because my, now, ex planned to ditch our anniversary plans to go to a concert, so I made a comment about how I hope the concert gets cancelled. And then it did because the opening band crashed and one of the members died. Or 2 nights ago, I'm laying in bed with my husband and I say Jesus, that light is bright, and suddenly we hear a click and the bedroom light turned off. It's a little alarming. And inconvenient. It never happens when I want it to, and I'm terrified whenever I have a nightmare about a family member. When I was 6, my grandparents took me to this Christian youth revival type event. There were skits about resisting the devil, sing-alongs for Jesus, gymnastic exhibitions for Jesus, guys in karate gear breaking boards for Jesus, things like that. In between the acts, the presenters would give small speeches about how important God is and how the devil's agents were among us, waiting to harm us. One thing stuck with me because it was really grim. He told of how Satanists were kidnapping people and eating them. Police just across the border had found a hell house, and in that house was a witch's cauldron filled with human body parts coming from a young man who had been taken right off the streets. The boy had been kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, then made into a stew that the Satanists ate to give them magic powers, the presenter told us kids. This was the summer of 1988. Years later, curious, I looked up the incident. A student named Mark Kilroy had, in fact, been kidnapped, tortured, murdered, and put in a cauldron by a cult leader and his followers in order to give them immunity from the police and other cartels. All the details fit, except that this happened in March of 1989, the year after the youth revival. How did the presenters know about the murder? Were they talking about another murder? Or did I end up in a Christian-themed time slip? I asked my grandmother about it. She said she had no idea what I was talking about and denied ever taking me to the youth revival. All these years I've never been able to explain it. My father, when I was a baby, claimed that nearly every night late into the morning he's seen a ghost while we lived in my grandma's giant house. This was during the 80s. We lived there for a year. After months of this, the topic came up in front of my grandma. She asked about what he saw. She couldn't believe the description my dad gave her and thought he was lying. She pulled out a photo album and my dad went through it and found my grandma's sister as a young adult who died young. He knew her name, age she died, where she was born, and a lot of other things he claimed she told him throughout her visit with him. My grandma was blown away and began crying because she never told him about her, and there's no way he could have known about her besides her sister telling my father herself. My grandmother would tell the story all the time when we were older and would visit her. My father said after we moved out he never saw her again. When I was 14, my parents were having renovations done to our house. The construction company ran over schedule, so they put us up in a hotel for a few weeks. One night the 5 of us, myself, parents, 2 siblings, went down to the hotel's pool and we stayed until the pool closed, which was 9 p.m. We then went to the elevator and us kids argued as to who got to push the button to the 4th floor, which is where our room was. Next thing we know, the elevator doors opened on the 7th floor and nearly half an hour from the time we entered the elevator had gone by. I was sitting on my back porch late one night when I noticed the motion censored light in my driveway turned on. As I'm looking, a man turns the corner into my yard, stops and stares at me. I couldn't tell who it was, but I wasn't expecting anyone. I open the door and ask if I can help him, and he takes off running the other way. I lock the doors and go check my security cameras on the side of the house. There was no one on camera. Once when I was 14 years old, I was sick with norovirus and curled up in the restroom. I was all alone that day, out of school and my mom was at work. She knew I was sick and was good friends with our doctor, and he could always write us a note and give us prescriptions without even coming in, as long as it wasn't for narcotics. So I am sitting there waiting for my mother to bring by some antibiotics on her lunch break. The old firing from both cylinders ordeal. I will spare the details. Anyways, I am in agony when suddenly I hear a very deep voice tell me to get up and get out of the restroom. I immediately felt better and gtfo because, scary voice and adrenaline yo. As soon as I get out of the restroom, a bullet comes flying through the window and hits the bottom of our toilet, right where my ducking head would have been. Thank you, evil good demonic Morgan Freeman voice. I like to think it was an audible hallucination because I was so out of it, and an awesome coincidence. Still makes me wonder though. My great-grandfather lived in that house and my father described him as a 7-foot mountain of a man with the voice of Satan. Maybe I should thank great-granddad? Who knows? I worked at a bakery once and had to start very early before dawn. One morning I was working alone and felt someone behind me. My senses were tingling and I knew it was someone but not a person. I was wondering if I should turn around, but my rational side was telling me not to. I turned around and could feel that someone was walking in front of me and where it laid its footsteps. There was a blender on the counter in front of where it walked to and it turns on. I stood there for like 30 seconds as my body was in shock before walking over and calmly turning it off. I remember having tunnel vision, like shooting a free throw, as I witnessed the presence walking in front of me. Funny thing is it was there, but didn't have an opaque form I could describe. I had a cousin who was pretty normal and happy the first 8 years of her life. One day out of the blue she started getting really upset if she was ever outside bare the woods. Day or night it didn't matter. Eventually my aunt got her to tell her why. Apparently whenever she'd be near the woods or open area she'd see a huge black wolf just glaring at her, baring teeth. Eventually she said it started coming in her dreams and telling her it was going to kill her family. These were pretty dark things coming from a young kid's mouth. Then she started saying she'd see kids come open her door at night and stare at her. They'd shut the door and leave her in the pitch black until she'd pass out from fear. She said she saw the wolf's eyes glaring at her from the closet. Now I've stayed at my cousin's house because me and her older brother were always hanging out. In her older brother's room there were tiny child-sized handprints on the ceiling above the bed. We assumed it was from my little cousin jumping on the bed and touching the ceiling, even though she wouldn't possibly be able to get that high. We tried painting over them but they'd show through every time. Super creepy. I never felt safe sleeping there anymore. Eventually my aunt got the church involved with my little cousin because she started saying the wolf was everywhere. At family gatherings, in the woods at my grandparents' house, up north at the cabins for our family vacation. The pastor came to their home and blessed the house to cleanse it of anything evil. Then one day it all just stopped. My cousin's in high school now and still scares the pies out of my adult self retelling these stories with new details I never knew. Crazy experience overall, but I'm glad she's better now and nothing ever followed me home. I have posted this before. A local supermarket has a dry cleaning shop inside. I went into the nearly empty parking lot early in the day. It was windy. I was sitting in my car trying to remember my shopping list. A well-dressed black woman parked near me. Got out of her car with a big armload of stuff for dry cleaning. Was having trouble because of the volume. She looked at a shopping cart in the lot, said something, and it rolled toward her upwind. She put her laundry in the cart, saw me as she was locking the car door. She said to me, "You did not see that." Me, "Yes, Mom." When I was a kid, my parents watched the same local news station on TV every single morning, so I got to know the sound of the reporters' voices after some time. But a lot of times, especially on the weekends, I'd hear the news on, so I'd go downstairs to the living room to see who's up. But the TV wouldn't be on, and no one would be awake. The only noise would be the sound of the water in the fish tank in the dining area. I've fallen for it countless times, because it sounded like their exact voices. I know this isn't the most exciting story, but it was really creepy and I'm not exactly sure what was causing the sound. On top of that, my older sister heard the voices too, so it wasn't just my imagination running wild. If it was her trying to prank me, then she probably would have admitted it by now since it's been several years, but we both still swear by our story. We've lived in other houses before and we've moved houses since then, and we've never had a problem like this. I was about 9 or 10, I think. One night, I woke up cause I was hella thirsty. Went to the kitchen, had my water and came back to my bedroom. Thing is, as soon as I walked in, I felt the hairs of the back of my neck rise. I was feeling unwelcome in my own goddamn bedroom, so I just ran to my bed and did the "all monsters can't see me if the blanket is over me." I waited like that for a few minutes and suddenly, I shit you not, I felt somebody pushing down on my head. 2 times. I got out of bed as fast as I could, the blanket still over my head cause I was afraid to look. Slept in my sister's bedroom that night. To this day, I still don't know if it was actually real or if I imagined it. but I still get the creeps when thinking about it. Cold weather survival training. 3 days in the mountains with the occasional below zero temps. 12 students, each 0.5 miles apart. We were given a kind of flare gum in case you hit a rosh it and gone AD moment and you were supposed to head to it if you saw one go off. Anyway, I'm in my shelter freezing my ass off and I see a flare go off. My heart sank and I grabbed my gear and rushed there. As I'm getting closer I see 3 more go off at different sites. Now I'm kinda panicking. 1 is bad, 4 is a shit show. I get within 100 feet of the first site and see the other student's shelter. I warn him I'm approaching and walk up to find him fine, fire going and everything. I ask him if he fired a flare or saw the others. He said nothing and shows me his flares, none had been fired. I check him out, looks fine. Still doesn't say anything, which is weird as duck. Thought he might be in shock, so I stayed a while until he points to the door. I take this as my cue and I just say I'm gonna leave if he's all set and he nods. I walk back toward my site and get an eerie feeling. The whole way, hairs are standing up. I start getting back into my shelter and there is someone in there. I tweak a little and think it must be another student until he looks up and just stares, expressionless. It took me a second to realize it was me, like looking in a mirror. I have never had a more terrible, scared, I should not be here feeling in my life. I bolted out of the shelter, tripped and fell. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in my shelter to a CADA member asking if I'm okay and if I'm ready to hike out. Think everything that happened was a dream. I get up and get my stuff together. As we are walking to meet up with the others, he asked me why I didn't respond to the flares last night. Terrifying. I used to be on a search and rescue patrol. We got a very strange call one night. A loud car crash in the middle of a rural area was reported by a nearby resident, but when emergency workers showed up, the victims were nowhere to be found. So we showed up to the scene and at the end of a very long dirt road there was a 90-degree turn with an embankment. The car was clearly going at a very high speed, missed the 90-degree turn, hit the embankment, flew through the air and the front of the car hit the ground so hard it gouged out a pretty sizable hole upon impact. The windshield showed 2 shattered impact zones where the passengers' heads hit, covered in blood and hair. There was more blood in and around the car. The scene was gruesome and didn't look like a survivable crash, especially given the mangled condition of the car. We expected to find bodies nearby. Police dogs, firefighters and now an entire search and rescue party was not able to locate the victims after several hours. As night set in it began to get more and more eerie. There was this horrible looking car crash but no bodies to be found. Finally, after about 3 hours of searching, there was a 911 call that came in. A report of a bloody dead body found in the bed of a parked pickup truck in a rural home's driveway a couple miles away. Apparently a family was coming home from a vacation, and when they pulled into their driveway, they noticed the body and immediately called 911. So 2 police units dispatched from the search to respond to the call. We all assumed this would be the end of the story. Well, the police showed up to the house and to everyone's surprise no body to be found. Somehow the body had vanished. There was blood, but no sign of anything else. So a second search radius started from that house. We searched practically the whole night. We're called back the next morning and nobody ever found the bodies. We eventually called the search off. To this day I have no idea what happened.